Hi, today we're going to be getting into how I managed to invest and save my way to $100,000. Specifically, I'll be getting into the tips that I used to get there and exactly where I put my money and how much I managed to save in each account. In the beginning of my financial journey, I was focused on paying off my debt. I had around $202,000 in student loan debt, and because of that, I decided to focus my efforts on, like I said, paying that off versus actually saving. So my debt-free journey lasted about 2.5 years. So for the majority of those years, I was focused on my debt versus savings. However, I did manage to save some money, and I'll get a little bit more into that. If you're trying to save money and you also have debt, know that it's probably best to pay your debt off first. Obviously, you can do both, which is what I did. However, I changed the degree of how much I save versus put towards debt because, like I said, debt was my priority. To determine if you should save versus pay off debt, one of the best ways to know is to determine how much the interest rate is on your debt and how much you can expect to make in terms of saving in, say, the stock market. The average inflation adjusted rate of the stock market since its inception has been 7%. So a good rule of thumb is if your debt is charging you less than 7%, then it's okay to, say, pay the minimum amount per month and invest or save the rest. Now that only works if you're putting your money in something that's going to give you a rate of return higher than 7%. If you're going to put it in, say, just a savings account, which at the moment is only offering, at least the high yield ones are only offering 0.5% in terms of interest, then it's better to pay your debt off. So that is a way that you can use to decide whether you should save or pay off debt. Additionally, since this is personal finance, it's definitely up to you to decide what you value and what is most important to you. If security is important to you, then you might want to focus more on saving and just putting the minimum amount towards your debt, or like I said, doing some combination of both. So it's totally up to you. But what I did was to pay off my debt first and then save afterwards. Now, in terms of actually saving money, I have found that the best way for me to do it is to automate it. So essentially that means setting up a system in which as soon as you get paid, the money that you're going to save goes into a savings account or a brokerage account that you can invest in. Or alternatively, 401k, 403b, Roth IRA, traditional IRA, or any other investment vehicle. What I do is to have my payroll set so that a certain amount of money goes to my bank account for each paycheck. So for example, say I get paid $1,000, I will have my payroll put away $500 for my essentials, spending and whatnot, and set aside the other $500 to go into savings. So that way the savings is in a separate account that I am less tempted to touch, and I have money set aside for my basic expenses so that I'm not once again tempted to dip into savings. The only way this works, however, is if you have some understanding of your incoming and outgoing expenses. Once you have that figured out, you can determine how much money you can actually save. And that's important because say you think you can save more money than you can, then you will probably end up dipping back into your savings account to cover your expenses when you realize that you cannot afford to live on what you've set aside. So once you've determined your income versus expenses and your income is more than your expenses, which is ideal, then you can put the excess towards savings. If your income is less than your expenses, then you obviously have to cut back on your expenses or increase your income. Personally, for me, I find that cutting back on expenses is easier to do because it doesn't require any actual work on my part. So go through your expenses, determine what is a necessity, what isn't, ways that you can decrease what you already have, etc. And then once you've dialed back your expenses, you can save what is in excess of that. If you decide that you want to increase your income, then that requires a little bit more work. So the easiest way that I have found when I'm trying to increase my income is to simply look around my house and see what I can sell. And you can do that in a number of places. You can do that in your community through marketplaces such as Facebook or Craigslist, or you can do it online through eBay, Poshmark, etc. And I personally prefer selling items because they don't require you to have any startup costs, any skills, or anything. You just have to look around your house to see what is necessary for you and what isn't. Now, if you want to go another road, you can work more hours at your job, pick up overtime, do more work, get a higher paying job, etc. Alternatively, if you have another skill set, you can do some sort of a side hustle. But for me, I don't have any particular additional talents besides what I have learned to do for a living. And I have found that it is actually more worthwhile for me to just work more or pick up extra hours than it is to try to start a side hustle, especially in the short term. But if you do have extra skills that you can utilize, then I definitely suggest you try to do so if you're trying to increase your income for the purpose of saving more money. Once you've determined how much money you can actually save, then the next step is where exactly to save it. If you plan to use the money in the next 5 years, then it's probably best to save it in a high yield savings account. And like I've said before, these are offering right now about 0.5% in terms of interest, but in the past they've offered up to 1 to 2%. You can currently find ones that offer up to 4%, or at least it may either be a checking account or a savings account. However, these accounts require you to do a little bit more legwork in order to get the higher interest rate. But for your typical run-of-the-mill high-yield savings account, the interest rate is going to be about 0.5. If the money that you plan to save isn't necessary for you in the next 5 years, then the alternative would be to invest it in the stock market. For me personally, I have found that exchange-traded funds or EFTs are the easiest / preferred way for me to invest in the stock market. And EFTs are essentially a group of stocks sharing a similar theme. So for example, a popular one is the total US stock market. This is essentially all the stocks in the US stock market that are available for trading in one fund. And I find the advantage of a exchange traded fund to be that they are highly diversified because they utilize a group of stocks, and because of that diversity they are less riskier than say individual stocks. Now, because they have a lower risk, that also means a lower reward. Not necessarily a poor reward, but it is unlikely that, say, if you put $5 in today, that the next day it's going to be worth $10. That is something that you can probably get with a individual stock such as the infamous one currently, GameStop. But in terms of exchange traded funds, the rate of return is usually gradually over years, and that is why I find it best if you have a long-term horizon. However you decide to invest your money, make sure that you are well informed about the risk and potential rewards, because anything that is recurring investment usually has some sort of risk, as in you may lose a portion of your money at some point in time, but on the other hand you are also put in a position to make more money than you ever could by simply investing in a savings account. So essentially do your due diligence to determine what is right for you. Now, when it comes to saving and investing, I like to do a sort of systematic approach to it. So the first place that I like to invest my money is in tax deferred or tax advantage accounts. So the first one being the 401k or 403b. And when I was paying down my debt, I only contributed the minimum amount of money to get my employer match. Ultimately, or at this point in time, you can contribute contribute up to $19,500 to a 401k or 403b. However, like I said, at the time my priority was to pay off debt, but I did not want to lose out on the employer match, which could not be recouped in the future. So I simply just put the minimum amount of money that I could to get the match, and then anything above that, which I received in my paycheck that didn't go to my expenses, would go directly to my student loan debt. In addition to saving for your future and being able to invest in the stock market to get greater returns, I find the advantage of saving and investing in the 401k or 403b to be that since you never receive the money physically, you don't technically miss it. And that's kind of the premise on which I base a lot of my savings, is whatever I don't see and I can't use immediately, then I don't mind the fact that it isn't there. So it's important to know when I started my debt-free journey a few years ago that I did not have any money in my 401k or 403b. However, I managed to save $63,233 in my account over the spans of 3 years. So around $40,000 of it was my own money. So I contributed for 2 tax years during those 3 years. And that means the rest of the money, so $23,000 or more, was employer matching, investment returns, and dividend. The next place that I like to put my money is in another tax deferred account called the health savings account, or HSA. And these are offered alongside a high deductible medical insurance plan in order to help you pay for medical expenses. Just like a 401k or 403b, the money is taken out pre-tax and you have the option to invest it in the stock market, which is what I did. Obviously, you can use the money to pay for medical expenses, like I mentioned before, but because I already had an emergency fund saved, I thought that if I were to incur any expense beyond what I could pay for based on my paycheck, that I would be covered. So I use my HSA solely to save for the future as a sort of retirement account. So when I reached my first $100,000 in savings, I had approximately $5,014 in my health savings account. And important to note that currently you can save up to a max of $3,550 in a health savings account every year. But during the time that I was saving, the max was $3,500. So in terms of investment returns, I made about $154 in my health savings account, and I had that account for less than 12 months. The next place that I like to save my money is in a Roth IRA, and that is yet another investment vehicle or a retirement vehicle. The difference between this and a 401k or 403b or HSA is that this is contributed to with after-tax money, so essentially money that you receive from your paycheck. When I was paying off my debt, I didn't contribute anything to my Roth IRA, but I previously had around $5,500 in that account from a prior year. So once I paid off my debt, I was able to contribute to the prior tax year and the current tax year, which is a awesome feature of Roth IRAs. And because of this and the years that I was able to save, I managed to save $25,657, and $23,000 of that was my own money. So in terms of a Roth IRA, currently you can save up to $6,000 per tax year. So of the $25,000 that I managed to save in that account, around $2,000 of it was investment returns and dividends. The last place that I saved to reach a goal of $100,000 was in a brokerage account. Now, this account was started after I paid off my debt because, like I said before, my focus was to pay off my debt in the quickest less time possible, so savings was not a priority for me. So once that was out of the way and I had that extra money from my debt payments that could now go to savings, I decided to open a brokerage account. Another reason for this is because, as I've mentioned before, lots of those retirement saving vehicles are limited to a certain amount of money per year, and because my goal is to become financially independent in the next 5 years, I needed to save above and beyond that, and that is where the brokerage account comes in. Off note, brokerage accounts are taxable, so whatever investment return or a dividend that you make from the investments in your account is taxable. So as it stands, if you don't sell any of the stocks in your brokerage account, then you don't have to pay a capital gains tax. However, every year you still have to pay taxes on the dividends that you earn in that account. So for my brokerage account, it works by debiting money from my checking account, which then goes to the brokerage account, and then once it's in the brokerage account, I can use that money to buy stocks. And like I've said, I prefer to buy exchange traded funds, so that is what I use the money for. So in the short time that I had this brokerage account, I managed to save $6,431, with $431 of that being investment income. And I will point out that my savings that goes into the brokerage account is automatically debited from my checking account on the day that I get paid, so there's no temptation for me to want to spend that money because it's already allotted, it's already in the brokerage account, so to speak, and therefore inaccessible. And that is one way that I managed to save large sums of money, is by making that money inaccessible to me. So in terms of context, I saved $73,865 in 3 years. So the rest of the $100,000 was employee matching, investment income, and dividends. So essentially $2,670 was passive income, so money that I did not have to actually work for, which is excellent and one of the advantages of investing and using resources that are available to you, such as employer matching. So if you can't manage to max out your retirement accounts, then make sure that you contribute at least the minimum to get the match, which is usually a small percentage of your actual take-home pay, which I find is manageable for most people. If you find that you don't want to invest beyond the basics, then that is totally fine. It's up to you. But in order to maximize the cash that you do have on hand, it's best to place it in some sort of savings account where you can get the most return for having it there. And of course, make sure that that money is in a FDIC insured bank, because there are a few non-banks that offer savings accounts, so to speak, that are not FDIC insured, and in the event that something happens to that establishment, your money up to $250,000 could be lost. So make sure that you're saving your money in a reputable bank. And that is how I managed to save $100,000 in 3 years. And if you'd like to do the same, all you have to do is follow the basics. So that is to spend less money, increase your income gradually if possible, and automate your savings to the best of your degree so that you don't have to think about it. If you follow those principles, you will be able to save money, even if it takes you a little bit longer. What are your savings goals? Let me know in the comments below, and whatever they are, good luck.